Group policy is a major feature of Active Directory. It is used to centrally manage the configuration of computers, users, and security groups. Windows Server 2012 has over 4,560 group policy settings that can be applied at any level in the Active Directory forest. In addition, it is possible to create and deploy your own custom policies. Although they are called group policies, they are not really deployed to groups. Instead, they're linked to Active Directory containers and are applied to the user and computer accounts inside those containers. Configuration management is an administrative strategy to control exactly what the user sees and experiences when logged into a computer. When implemented properly, configuration management reduces support calls and helps users stay focused on their work. Group policy is the Windows Server implementation of configuration management. Configuration management commonly includes restricting the types of software that can be installed on the client, restricting what the user sees and can access on the desktop, restricting access to administrative type tools, configuring desktop appearance to conform to company policy or even government regulations, mapping network drives and managing network storage, managing software updates, and configuring folder redirection. There are three key elements of configuration management. The first is settings, and these are configurations that bring the user or computer to a desired state. Then there's the scope, which is the extent to which you want a configuration change to impact the network. And finally, there's the application, which is the process for deploying, updating, managing, and deleting configuration settings. Group policy provides many benefits for managing your Active Directory network. And these include automated configuration, automated software deployment, enhanced user experiences, increased worker productivity, increased security, simplified administration, and maintaining consistent policies across the organization. Windows Server 2012 Group Policy has a number of improvements for enterprise-class configuration management. Now, some of the more significant changes that have come in 2012 are improved troubleshooting. There is additional data in the resultant set of policy or RSOP reporting, including a summary tab and warnings on items that might impact group policy processing, such as a block inheritance. There's been an update to the remote group policy. There's now the ability to trigger remote group policy refreshes from a central location. And the group policy infrastructure status has been updated as well. And basically the status tab of the group policy with a Detect Now button has been added to ensure that GPOs on each domain controller are in sync. Now, there has been a deprecation of Internet Explorer maintenance policies. This support was removed for editing and processing in the problematic Internet Explorer maintenance policy in Windows 8 and Windows Server 2012. And the group policy client service power savings has been added in. And this is the group policy client service responsible for processing policies, and it shuts down after 10 minutes of inactivity on Windows 8 clients to reduce the power consumption. All in all, there are actually 350 new settings specific to Windows Server 2012 and Windows 8. The group policy scope defines how far-reaching the impact will be of a particular group policy. Group policies do not have any impact until they are linked to a container in Active Directory. They can be linked at any of three different levels. When you link a group policy to a container at one of these levels, the policy applies to all users, groups, and computer accounts in that container. In addition, unless otherwise configured, any policy applied to a parent container will flow down into child containers below it. Now, the three group policy levels are as follows. The first is site, and these settings apply to all users, groups, and computers in the Active Directory site, regardless of their domain membership. The second is domain, and these are settings that apply to all users, groups, and computers in the Active Directory domain, regardless of the site that they're located in. And then finally, there's the organizational unit, or OU. And these are settings that apply to all users, groups, and computers in that particular OU, or organizational unit. Group policy application is the Active Directory mechanism for deploying group policies. When the computer boots up or a user logs on, the computer downloads the latest group policy settings and applies them. Group policies are actually objects stored in Active Directory, and they comprise of two parts. The first is the group policy containers, which are the policies themselves without any settings. These include the version number and a unique ID that can be seen in Active Directory Users and Computers Advanced View. And there are group policy templates. And these are where the actual settings are applied to users, groups, and computers. When you edit a group policy, you modify the template associated with the GPC. It is this template that is downloaded by the computers when they check for group policy. Now, group policy client-side extensions, or CSEs, are the actual components on a computer that enforce group policy. Now, there are over 80 client-side extensions that enforce different parts of a group policy, everything from disk quotas to certificates, registry and security settings, and preferences. The group policy client is a service that runs on every Windows computer. It is responsible for applying the CSEs and enforcing group policy on the computer. Now, do keep in mind that while you cannot configure the group policy client service in the graphical user interface, or GUI, it is possible to disable it in the computer's registry. Group policy refreshes in the background while the computer is on or the user is logged in. Now, the default refresh rate is about every 90 to 120 minutes on clients and servers and every 5 minutes on domain controllers. It also refreshes when a computer reboots or a user logs out and logs back in. Security and folder redirection settings are refreshed upon reboot or login as well. In addition, the Security CSE manages an exception to the default policy processing settings. Now, security settings are reapplied every 16 hours, even if a GPO is not changed. The group policy refresh interval can be configured. To do this, you create a group policy specifically to set the refresh interval and apply the policy to the container that has the computer accounts. Now, if you want to go digging, you can find this setting in the computer configuration, policies, administrative templates, system, group policy, and there's a section in there called set group policy refresh interval for computers. It's a bit of digging in there to find it, but if you're interested in that, that's where you can go dig in and fiddle with that setting some if you're not happy with the 16 hours. You may have requirements for compliance that has to be reapplied every 8 hours or every 4 hours. That's really going to come down to whatever is determined within the company that you're working with. Group policy has several management utilities available for an administrator to use. There's the Group Policy Management Console, or the gpmc, which is used to create, link, unlink, and configure general settings on a group policy. There's the Group Policy Management Editor, or the gpme, which is used to edit the actual computer and user settings defined in the group policy. gpresult.exe is used to determine the RSOP on a particular user computer. And this is, of course, being an executable. This is a command line. And also on a command line, you have gpupdate.exe, which is used to force policy refreshes on a particular computer. And finally, as how a lot of things are going with Windows, PowerShell is used for the general management of group policies. The gpmc is the primary tool you will use to create and manage group policies. You can open it from the Server Manager Tools menu or by typing gmpc.msc at a command prompt. Now, when you open the gpmc, you will see that it is organized into a hierarchical structure of nodes. And these nodes are the forest, domain, there's domain controllers, managed objects, OUs, GPOs, there's a Windows Management Instrumentation or WMI filters, starter GPOs, sites, group policy modeling, and even group policy results. Now, if the node represents an Active Directory container, for example, a site, domain, OU, or managed object, you will also see any group policies linked to that container. So let's take a closer look at each one of these nodes that are in the gpmc. So let's start here with the forest node. Now, the forest node shows which Active Directory forest the gpmc is focused on. You can right-click the forest node to change your view to a different forest, providing you have administrator permission on that forest. And keep in mind that you cannot link group policies directly to this node. The second node is the domains node. And the domains node shows all the different domains within your forest. You can expand each specific domain to see what policies apply. You can also right-click the parent domain nodes and perform some of the following tasks. You can actually manage backups to back up your group policy. You can open a migration table editor for copying or importing GPOs from one domain to another. In addition, you can right-click a specific domain to create and link group policies at the domain level. But you cannot link group policies directly to this node either, just like the forest node. Moving on, we leave the domains, which is a plural, and we come into the domain node. Now do note this is singular. And the domain node represents a specific Active Directory domain in your forest. You can expand the domain node to see child containers, management nodes, and policies for that particular domain. You can link a group policy directly to this node if you need the policy to apply to all users and computers in the domain. Next node, the domain controllers node. And the domain controllers node corresponds to the domain controllers OU in Active Directory users and computers. By default, domain controllers are placed in their own OU in Active Directory. Because domain controllers require special security settings, you should leave them in their default OU and not add any other objects to the OU. You can link any group policy to this node if you wish. Just be aware that the settings will apply specifically to the domain controllers. Next, we have the OU node, or the organizational unit. And this corresponds to any administrator-created organizational units if they exist. Again, if you didn't create any, you're not going to find any in here. And again, this is in the Active Directory's Users and Computers section. Now, a default installation will not have any organizational units, but this is the most common level to link group policies to. This is organizational units. So you can sit there and say, oh, these are the accounting systems, and we don't want to mess up our accounting system by pushing updates or other group policies that may affect them, versus the IT team test crew, which are always testing the latest patches and updates. So that's kind of how you can use these organizational units and think about them, and how they actually structure themselves within your network. There's a GPOs node, and this is the group policy objects node, where the actual group policies are created and stored. We can create new policies here, and we can leave them unlinked. You can then choose to link them later as desired. While the GPOs node contains the policies, you actually can't link a policy to this container, mainly because it doesn't contain any users or computer accounts. It only holds your policies that you've created. Continuing on, we have the WMI filters node. And the WMI filters node stores Windows Management Instrumentation filters, and that's what our WMI stands for. Now, WMI filters can be used to specify additional hardware and software configuration requirements for policy to apply to a computer. Here you can't link a group policy directly to this container. WMI filters are defined, and they do not have to be associated with a group policy. They can be used or not at any time through our other policies, and we'll see that later on as we go through some stuff. Now, there is a starter GPOs node, and this node contains starter GPOs. And these are group policy templates an administrator creates to be used as the basis for creating additional group policies. And in the starter GPOs, if you go take a look at it, you'll see there are 10 default starter GPOs that ship with Windows Server 2012. Then we've got the sites node. And the sites node presents Active Directory sites. You can right-click this node to show the sites within the forest. You can then right-click the site to link a GPO to it. GPOs linked to a site will apply to all computers and users in that site, regardless of the domain they belong to. However, if a domain is spread across multiple sites, site-level settings will only apply to accounts in that particular site. Now, a site is defined by its IP subnets. Clients become aware of the site they are in based on their IP address. If you create a site but do not associate at least one subnet with that site, your group policy settings may not apply. An Active Directory forest starts with one site, the default first site name. It encompasses the entire forest and has no specific subnets. You can link a GPO to the default site, but only an enterprise administrator can link GPOs to a site. Then we have the Group Policy Modeling node. And the Group Policy Modeling node allows you to create what-if scenarios to see what the resultant set of policies, that RSOP, would be on a user or computer based on the criteria you select. This can help you plan the placement of user and computer accounts as your group policy infrastructure gets more complex. Then there's also a Group Policy Results node. And the Group Policy Results node shows the policy that currently applies to a particular user or computer. It can only provide results to computers that have previously booted up or users who have already logged on at least once to a computer, since it's basically pulling off of historical information. If the system is never booted up or the user's never logged on, there was never a policy applied, nothing for us to see. Now, it cannot be used to model results for accounts that have not yet logged on. Again, for that reason I just stated. If it hasn't logged on, a policy hasn't been applied, there's no model results to see. So moving on here, let's take a look at the GPME. Now, the Group Policy Management Editor is used to edit the settings of a particular group policy. You can right-click any policy in the gpmc and then select Edit to open the GPME. You can also enter the command gpme.msc at a command line to directly open the GPME. Now, what it does is it organizes group policy settings into two major nodes, computer configuration and user configuration. And these nodes can be further opened to configure settings for specifically users and computers. There are 26 PowerShell commandlets available to manage group policy, and you can use them to perform the following tasks for domain-based GPOs. You can maintain GPOs, which include GPO creation, removal, backup, reporting, and import. You can associate GPOs with Active Directory Domain Services, or ADDS containers, which include group policy link creation, update, and removal. You can set the inheritance and permissions on the ADDS OUs and domains. And you can also configure registry-based policy settings and group policy preferences registry settings. Continuing with some of the PowerShell commands that we have, there is backup-GPO, and this backs up one GPO or all of the GPOs in a domain. There's a get GP inheritance, and this retrieves group policy inheritance information for a specified domain or OU. There's a get GPO report, which generates a report in either XML or HTML format for a specified GPO or for all GPOs in a domain. There's a get GP permission, which gets the permission level for one or more security principals on a specified GPO. A get GP resultant set of policy, which outputs the RSOP information to a file for a user, a computer, or both. And also the import GPO, which imports the group policy settings from a backed up GPO into a specified GPO. Now, again, a lot of PowerShell commands. So continuing on, we have the new GP link, which links a GPO to a site domain or OU. New GPO, which creates a new GPO. So one of the things I love about PowerShell is that the names actually pretty much tell you what they do. But let's take a look at a few more here. We've got a new GP starter GPO, which creates a new starter GPO. A remove GP link, which removes a GPO link from a site, domain, or OU. There's get GPO, which gets information about the GPO you specified. And there's a restore GPO, which restores one GPO or all GPOs in a domain from one or more GPO backup files. All right, so that was a lot to look at there and a lot to pick up. But let's take a look at the steps in creating a group policy in our lab environment. Okay, so here I am logged into my domain controller. I'll show you right here, LNO_DC on my local host. This is my domain controller for my lab environment, and I am logged in as the domain administrator. Now let's pull up a scenario here. So we are the system administrator for our fictional company, Fuller and Ackerman Publishing, and the company is preparing to implement group policies as a management solution. Now we've been tasked with creating 2 new group policies. Now, we will not be required to edit any of the settings at this time. We just want to create the policies. And what we'll do is we'll use PowerShell for one, and we'll use the GUI for the other. So we'll start off. Let's get in here, and let's get PowerShell started first. Open up my PowerShell. And to create a new GPO group here, a group policy, I am going to enter new GPO and name, and we're going to call it Research GPO. I'll make that all one word. Once I got that set, hit enter. And you can see I have my new display name, Research GPO, domain name, Fuller.local, owner, and all the other information here. So that has got the new group policy named Research GPO. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to exit PowerShell. Just shows how quick PowerShell can be. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to use the group policy management console this time, for the next one. So I'll open up my server manager. Come up under tools. And I'm going to use my group policy management. Take it just a minute for it here to catch up. All right, so I've got my forest fuller.local expanded domain fuller.local, and here's my group policy objects. We'll widen this up a bit here. So I have my group policy objects container, and I'm going to want to right click on this and select new. Now in my new GPO dialog box for the name, I'm going to call this Research 2 for the second group. I'm just source starter GPO, not going to worry about, select OK. And here you'll see we've got Research 2 and Research GPO. Research GPO being the one that we created with PowerShell, and Research 2 the one we created just now. Now I'm going to come over here to my organizational unit of research, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to select Link an Existing GPO. And it'll pull up the list of the different GPOs that I have. And I want to link my Research GPO for this demo. I'm going to select OK, but I'm not going to link Research 2. I'm just going to leave it as it is that way. So now that we've got that set here, I'm going to expand my group policy objects. I'm going to verify that my Research 2 and Research GPO are there. They're also displayed over here in the center. I'm going to expand Research OU, or sorry, that's not what I want. I wanted my Research organizational unit, and you'll see that Research GPO is linked to it now. Oops, I'm just going to say OK on this real quick. I just wanted to click here and show that it is here. It is there. The scope and everything is set. But Research 2 is not here under the Research organizational unit because we did not link it yet. And that's all there is to creating a group policy.